Hello, Hugh. How are you
Hello.
doing today?
I am doing okay, but I'm not sure that I'm being my best positive self, and therefore I may be getting marked down because I am sat around chatting to you, and I haven't quite understood whether or not this podcast is a positive or a negative thing that I'm putting out into the universe. So it may send me to hell. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, have you got high enough on mushrooms in order to be sure that you're correct there?
No. Unfortunately, I live on the 6th floor, so it's rather difficult for me to find any mushrooms at this height.
Brilliant. Anyway, hello everybody. This is the LHC, and today we are going to talk about the wonderful the situational comedy by... One second. Michael Schur from NBC called The Good Place. It's important to remember this came from one of the guys who worked on The American Office and Parks and Recreation, which he co-created along with Greg Daniels. He also co-created Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So, in a way, Michael Schur is one of the best creators of American comedy living today.
Well, I would definitely vouch for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I haven't seen Parks and Rec, but I keep getting told I should. And I didn't watch The American Office, I only watched the English one.
Well, The American Office is just a good example of good pedigree. I mean, I don't particularly like the American Office, but it's a good thing to bring up, I always say.
Oh, yeah, no, it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
But no, Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Good Place are two of the best comedies to come out of America for a lot of years now.
Mm-hmm. So, here we have is the... So the whole point of The Good Place, the show, is it takes place...
Spoiler warning.
...in The Good Place. And we're going to talk about Season 1, pretty much. So, spoilers for Season 1.
Yes, vast spoilers for Season 1.
But yeah, the setting of The Good Place is quite self-explanatory. Although, I'm going to have to say the setting of the show quite a few times, because the show arguably changes its whole premise several times a season. In a world of comedy where the premise and status quo is so often really important, The Good Place changes that pretty much every half season.
Yeah, it's really one of the most daring. I mean, we're not going to talk about Series 2 or 3, but it really is amazing the way they don't just keep reusing the same situation every time. And it's so unusual to have a show taking risks like that.
Indeed. Well, it does get more obvious, but the premise of the show does essentially change twice. There are like two major arcs in this season. So let's talk about the first arc, first of all, where we meet Eleanor Shorstrop, played by Kristen Bell, and she has recently deceased, and she has apparently entered an afterlife utopia, which is just called The Good Place. And she's brought around by the architect of the particular chunk of The Good Place she's in, Michael, played by Ted Danson, in perhaps in a man who's played previously two seminal comedy roles. He has now moved on to play his third, even better comedy role.
He is fantastic in this. Like, he's a really good actor.
Well, Ted Danson, like I said, he's played characters...
Sam in Cheers,
and then Becca.
in Becca.
I'm glad you agree that Becca was a good role for him, because Becca never really took off, and I liked Becca.
I didn't know. Did Becca not take off? There was a lot of it for something that didn't take off.
Some of it, but it never got like super popular, and it never really knew what to do with itself. But I liked Ted Danson as Becca, and it's the reason why I liked House, because I always think like Becca was like the precursor to House.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. But also, I think that with coming off Cheers, it's a bit like coming off Friends.
Yeah.
You know, you're just like, hey, I've just been in this series for like 10 years that has changed the fabric of the American culture. Gonna do something a bit safer now? I mean...
yeah, just going to do it.
You can't do it again. Unless he had literally come off Cheers and onto Friends, there wasn't a lot he was going to do that was going to be received in any, fanfare like the prior series.
Yeah. It was nice. I mean, it at least had one person who was differently abled in Becca. There was a character who had no sight.
Yeah, that's true.
He was pretty cool. But yes, anyway, we're talking about The Good Place, not Becca. Becca's going to be another podcast, apparently. But yeah.
I should watch Becca again.
Yeah. So Eleanor meets up with her apparent, what's the word? A soulmate, that's it. Chichi Alagogne, who is played by William Jackson Harper. And she pretty much admits to him right away that there has been a mistake, and she is not the Eleanor Shawstrop, or is not the right person to be in The Good Place, because apparently all of the information about her life that Michael showed Eleanor,
all her charity work,
and everything,
works and everything.
Yeah, a death row lawyer who helped people get off out of the death penalty. Apparently, was not her. She was actually a telemarketer or a salesperson. A telesales
for sugar pills.
It says chalk.
Oh yeah, sorry, chalk. Yes,
apparently chalk pills, and they defrauded
the elderly,
the sick. To sell to the sick elderly, and she was apparently very good at it. But yeah, I do love that when she's like, "Hey, in my defense, I was like top saleswoman for 3 years in a row." It's like, you understand how that's worse, right? Yeah, that's not actually good. So, yeah, this basically leads to a sort of a bit of a fumble round where the show tries to sort of set itself up, and we kind of see like this kind of arguably corny heaven where everyone's basically living in like a tacky Disneyland version of Rhodes. If you look at it, the set design, by the way, is amazing, but it doesn't. It does look like, oh, here I am in. If there was a Rhodes part of like the multiple nations area of Epcot, of the Epcot Center in Disney World, you know how they've got like different.
Having
countries?
Never been to Disneyland, and I don't even know what you're meaning by Rhodes.
Rhodes is a Greek island. It's Greek islands. You can actually see it in the new Assassin's Creed, and it's kept its sort of cobbled street look, and it's quite nice.
All right, okay.
But yeah, this adds like extra pastely sort of colours to it. I mean, I'm only going by what I've seen, so.
Yeah, but it's essentially like it's a heaven designed for the people who are in it specifically.
Mm.
But because every time the heaven is designed with the idea in mind that everyone there is a nice person.
Yeah.
Every time Eleanor is selfish or horrible or just generally behaves in a way that it wouldn't expect someone of her caliber of humanity to behave, something goes wrong.
Something seems to go wrong. That seems to be the thing that the conclusion that they come to pretty much at the end of the first episode is that just immediately this is Eleanor's fault. So the idea is Eleanor needs to act like a good person in order to get through.
Yeah, because every time she acts a way that isn't moral, something like a giant sinkhole appears or giant shrimp attack everyone because she stole all the shrimp at a party and was selfish. Things like this. So it's actually really interesting watching it and going, yes, there is where, she behaves like this and therefore this is what horrible catastrophe hits everyone the next day.
So it kind of settles into a focus here where Chidi will try and explain a very early sort of A-level concept of philosophy to Eleanor. And because it's still in a sitcom, even though it's quite a genre-busting, trailblazing sitcom, generally, the whole meta story around that immediately plays into the exact ethical, philosophical thing that is brought up by Chidi. So essentially, what is it? The good one.
I wouldn't say it's that. It doesn't. Bad.
It's a good example
because actually, no. What I'm saying is actually half the time she says there is this situation, and he goes, "Well, that reminds me of something Kant said."
He does say that as well.
It's more the other way round.
I don't know. I'd say there's a bit where. Do you remember in the episode where he brings up utilitarianism, and then later it's basically revealed that anything that positive happens to Eleanor will be negative to Michael. Or no, Chidi, negative to Chidi, because basically having to look after her and having to hide her from everyone else just provokes massive stress from him, because Chidi really does want to be a good person, but he's incredibly unable to make decisions.
Yeah.
And so the problem of having to help Eleanor, but helping Eleanor also inconveniences everyone else, is a massive ethical quandary for Chidi. And that's sort of like his problem during the whole sort of early bit. And of course, the great thing is that Eleanor, while she kind of wants to be good, she's kind of a mess up. So, like, her idea of how to sort out situations almost inevitably leans towards the more self-serving version.
Yeah. But then we have the change in the premise, really.
Well, yeah, eventually what happens is essentially this keeps on being brought up and bad things keep happening. And Michael says, I'm the problem and he's going to leave, which initially seems to be okay because it just means that she can just chill out and with no one who can really properly work out that she doesn't belong in the good place won't be around. But because of character development, Eleanor actually straight up stands up and says, no, you're not the problem, I'm the problem. Because, of course, it's revealed that when Michael does leave, it's not going to be leave, he's actually going to be killed. Or killed as best as an immortal being can be.
Yeah, so after, I think it's 7 episodes when that actually happens. So
pretty much
just
midway
halfway through the series.
Midway through the series. So they change it then from we're hiding Eleanor in the good place to now
we're defending her right to stay.
Defending her right to stay or trying to make her a good person. So it's also... But it's not just Eleanor that doesn't belong in the good place, because in those 7 episodes we also meet and sort of learn about 2 other characters. One of whom is...
Jason or John Yu.
Yeah, it's the person who's introduced as John Yu, but is then eventually revealed to be Jason Mendoza, who is from Jacksonville, Florida, who is literally Florida Man, it seems. And also Tahani Arjamal, who is a philanthropist, played by Jamila Jamil, sorry, and Jason Mendoza is played by Manny Jacinto.
And her performance is actually really, I think, interesting, because I can't stand the character at all, but I really respect her being in the show. Like, she's played really well, but because she's being played so well, you can't like her.
Indeed. Tamani Jamil is a very interesting example, because she is quite a wealthy person. She has done a lot of good stuff. Like, it's like clear that she has raised a lot of money for charity, more than perhaps most regular people do, but she incessantly name drops and talks herself up and sort of really doesn't seem to have too much of a consideration for other people, except how that they reflect positively back on her.
She's more concerned with the optics of having consideration for other people.
Indeed, yes. Her big thing that swings her over sort of midway through, like, the first arc of the show is that she finds out she's second from bottom in the rankings of how many good points people got to get into the good place for everyone in the neighborhood. So she gets a bit sort of uppity about that and wants to be even better, but of course she kind of doesn't succeed into it.
No, because she's dead, and actions you've taken after you... So the way the ranking system works is essentially every decision you ever make on Earth comes with a plus or a negative based on how much good or suffering it puts into the universe. And as soon as you die, that is a locked number. So her score cannot change, and it's always going to be... She's always going to be surrounded by people who are objectively better than she is. Is the major problem
which, of course,
she has.
Which is great, because this is a segue into... And we learn about that's really the thing that she doesn't like, is because she was always second best in her parents' eyes to her sister. And her parents ruthlessly pitted them against each other.
Yeah.
In order to do this. And that's one thing we learn through flashbacks of their time on Earth, which we see from everybody, because we see a good example, like the easiest way is how it's shown with Eleanor, because generally what we see is an example of Eleanor doing the opposite bad thing that is generally being discussed in a given episode, and being selfish on Earth, to reflect, to show like how she'll hopefully change in this episode. So, you know, the one that immediately comes to mind is, you know, you've got to do the right thing. Good things are created by good actions. And she's asked to look after a dog in like the flashback. And the moment it becomes inconvenient for her, she books it. And doesn't, because she's got Ariana Grande tickets. So she just
Rihanna,
leaves.
I think, actually.
Oh, is it Rihanna? Not Ariana.
Yeah.
No, Ariana Grande is the
Ariana
song
Grande
that's
is
played
Jason's
at the start,
obsession.
isn't it? Because she can't pronounce Cheety's last name.
Anagonye. Maybe.
Yeah, because she says that.
Ariana Grande is referenced repeatedly by Jason, I know that.
Yeah, I know, he as well. But yeah, she does mention it. But so anyway, so sorry, she's going to a Rihanna concert. She leaves the dog with just all the food hanging around, so it gets incredibly fat in a really comical way. But but then of course it clicks back to what she has to do there, and she decides to do the opposite, which is a nice way of showing difference. But what's great is this happens several times throughout even this first season, but Eleanor doesn't magically become a completely better person. She just gradually starts doing the right thing in difference to what she had done before, which is nice because it shows how genuinely hard it is to change as a person.
But it was also good that it is at first sort of she reluctantly does things based on Cheetah telling her.
Yeah.
But as the series goes on, she does just start like internalizing it and doing it automatically, and then she starts making active decisions without consulting him and working it out on her own. And I do think Eleanor is a fantastic character. I really think she's very fleshed out and moves through the series with real character development that isn't... You know, I'm always a fan of more subtlety than just spelling it out, and I do feel like she does grow notably without it really having like massive signposted events. Yeah.
But yes, so the second half, like you say, is now everyone is trying to protect Eleanor's right to be in the good place. But then also we've also got to think about Jason, which kind of isn't... I can't remember. It's not really that brought up.
Nobody really brings up that Jason shouldn't be there, because at the beginning...
They're more focused on Eleanor.
They're all focused on Eleanor, and actually it's not until the very second to last episode that anyone even notices that Jason's not meant to be in there. Because they continue to hide him even long after Eleanor's confessed.
That's true. So... so that's that bit. So then we have this new bit where it's like a few episodes of either trying to make Eleanor good enough, but then, unfortunately, what was it? The bad place finds out. Apparently, that's what happens, isn't it?
No, they tell the bad place.
Oh, they tell the bad place.
They tell the bad place that she doesn't belong here, you can come and pick her up. And this is before they've persuaded him that she should be allowed to stay. By the time the bad place arrive, Michael already
she should
rescinded their opinion that they should get rid of her and that she should stay. At which point the bad place say, well, we've got the other one.
Yeah, the actual the other good Eleanor Strong.
Exactly, yeah. So we're going to keep her then. And so there's a big argument over the fact that some people should be in there and some people should not be in there, and who gets to stay and who doesn't get to stay. So who will have to go to the bad place and who can stay in paradise?
Paradise. Because that's the thing. Is like this heaven is kind of a bit like and even at the start, like this becomes more of an obvious thing. Is that while Michael portrays the whole system as this infallible idea, Eleanor herself is walking proof that there's something that doesn't work in it.
Yeah.
Because she's there and Michael doesn't know. And then later it's revealed that Jason's there and Michael doesn't know.
But what I liked is that they do give a reasonably good explanation for that in the way that they point out this is Michael's first try.
Yes.
And actually he's trying something new that's never been done before.
Yeah.
So he's there saying, this is my project. It's my very first project, and it might not work.
Yeah, might not work because architects aren't supposed to hang around in their things. So that's why he so often thinks he's a man. By the way, I'm glad we mentioned Friends, because there is this great episode just before she reveals where he watches all of Friends, and there's just occasional just massive burns on Friends.
Yeah,
like he says, the one thing that even I as a eternal being cannot work out is, how did they afford that apartment? It's like, how did Monica and Rachel afford that apartment?
You see, that's the criticism everyone always cites, but they do actually give an in-series reason for it.
Yeah, there is, isn't there?
I have a lot of criticisms of Friends, like way more criticisms than we have time for in a Good Place episode. If you want to complain about Friends, I will happily do a separate podcast about it.
Yeah.
But the one thing about that is that, firstly, Chandler has a big apartment because Chandler is ridiculously wealthy and doesn't spend it on anything at all until later on with his wedding and stuff. And Monica, it's not her apartment. It's her grandmother's apartment that she got ages ago, and then her grandmother moves out and lets Monica live there, and it's a rent-controlled apartment, and it's been rent-controlled since her grandmother moved in, which, if you think, is probably, 20, 30 years ago, potentially.
Yeah, so probably would be affordable, yeah.
Yeah, it would be perfectly affordable if Monica is paying a reasonable rate from the 70s in the early 90s. It probably would be affordable for her. It's not affordable for her on her own. She does need a roommate, but 2 minimum wage people being able to afford that might be, again, because it's rent controlled by her grandmother. That's the main point of the thing you'd say.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, coming away from Friends.
Coming away from Friends, yes. So then we have this whole sort of thing with the bad place turning up, and it's the guy. Oh, who's the guy?
Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor. Thank you. Played by Adam Scott, who was in Parks and Recreation, and it's kind of weird because he plays like a really nice moral nerd. He plays essentially the Cheaty of Parks and Recreation, but in this one he's just a raging a-hole.
All I know him as is the bad place guy.
Oh no, he's like
I've never seen him in anything else.
Basically Cheaty in Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Rec.
He's like a well-meaning, very nerdy guy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. It's weird for me to see him like that, and of course. Then later there's also the all-powerful eternal judge, Sean, played by Mark Evan Jackson, who we will remember as
the husband
of Ray Colt. Of Raymond Holt, from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, I love that guy. He's fantastic. He's also in one of the deleted scenes of the film Popstar Never Stop, Never Stopping.
Oh, is he?
As judgmental parent. He doesn't actually have any lines. I think he's judgmental teacher.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's it. He's the judgmental teacher in the song F You. Sorry, F Off. It's like, he's the teacher who's always riding you.
He's also, while we're talking about Mark Evan Jackson, he was also a random scientist who sides with with Samuel L. Jackson's side in the new Kong movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was kind of good to see him. I was like, oh my god, look at that.
He's getting work.
But yeah, yes, so there's a few things like that. They do things like run away after it looks like things are really doomed. They run away to the medium place, which is apparently only has one person in it. It's someone who was not good enough for the good place, but not horrible enough for the bad place.
Well, it's the whole thing with her is that she was a horrible person who then decided that she would start a charity and fix the world, and got all the money out and was just about to do that because she wrote down all her plans and everything, and then she was killed on the way to do it. But her sister found her notes and her money and used that. So it's a case of who gets the points. Does the sister get the points because she did it? Or does this woman get the points because she designed and was going to, and she genuinely was going to implement it with all of her life savings? And so she dies with a really negative point total because she's a selfish, 80s stockbroker. But if she had just lived another couple of years, she would have got one of the highest point totals ever in the history of mankind. So it's like, So yeah, they give her the medium place, which is everything she'd ever want, but slightly bad.
Exactly. It's sort of like everything they've got, but there's something slightly off. So it's all, which is weird because what it says, you've got your favourite beer in the fridge, but it's all room temperature. But the real joke is not so much that that she's in the medium place, it's just that she's alone. So she's got loner weird stuff happening.
Well, she just doesn't bother getting dressed
until
they arrive because she doesn't see the point. And it's just like, oh, it's time for my masturbation. And they're just like, when is it not time for that with you?
it's the thing. There's another character that turns up later who I also love from season 2 who gets involved, but we obviously
No, you can't.
we'll
talk
have to
about
wait
that,
until the next the next podcast about season 2 to talk about that. But my favourite character turns up in season 2. Anyway, so and that's and then.
But eventually, when they find out that if they hide in the medium place, that people will be sent to the bad place in
they
their
come
stead.
back. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Eleanor essentially decides that she doesn't want anyone to sacrifice themselves for her, so she is going to come back.
Mm-hmm. So she does come back, and I forget who it was that eventually... Oh yeah, but eventually, after messing around a bit, we come to the big climax, which is the right time to bring up in this thing, where Eleanor works out that this really doesn't make sense, even if it was run by Michael for his first time, for it to be the good place. And she works...
Because it's just this horrible.
Yes, it's just this horrible. Specifically, apparently, for the three of them. For everyone. Because you look at it and it's like, both Jason and Eleanor aren't good enough to be in the good place. They're clearly wrong. And their existence causes problems for Cheaty because he doesn't want to do something horrible like narking someone out to eternal damnation, but also doesn't want to hide things from people because he has a whole little mini arc in this one where they explain his hatred of lying, where he said he likes someone's cowboy boots, and it traps him in this internal thing of having to have these cowboy boots that this other guy gets in
3 years.
For 3 years,
and also having to watch as this guy damages his prospects with everyone else. Because he keeps wearing them. And people are like, oh, I'm not hanging out with that weirdo who wears those weird cowboy boots. So yeah, that's another great bit. But yeah, and also, as we mentioned before, Tahani hates being compared to people and who are clearly objectively better than her, which was the worst part of her whole actual living life. Yeah.
And so immediately Eleanor puts 2 and 2 together and realises that it's actually the bad place.
Yes,
and this gets
which is sort of the big twisty reveal at the end of the series.
It's revealed in a really nice way, because for the first time, we've been seeing flashbacks of everyone else's life, and then we see a flashback of Michael's life, of him coming up with the idea, and about midway through, it's revealed, oh yeah, so Michael was a bad place architect, and his idea was to actually get 4 humans to psychologically torture each other, rather than just physically torturing humans, which is apparently the only way the bad place knows how to hurt people.
Yeah.
It's just by being, really horrible to them.
Yeah. Which is an idea that's been done before, most notably, I think, Terry Pratchett's book, Eric, where there's a new hell, there's a new person gets put in charge of hell who decides that rather than just torturing people, actually what humans hate more than physical pain is, in fact, just boredom and irritation. So it's oh, he's got to put a boulder up the hill. No, before he's allowed to push the boulder up the hill, he has to memorize the entire safety manual of all the ways you should lift and carry a boulder. And what about that demon? Well, that demon, he's showing the holiday snaps of when he went to that lake of fire. And he's here is us at the lake of fire. Here is us a meter further along the coast at the lake of fire. And it's just all the people watching. So
I'm reminded of
that what humans hate more than anything else is mind-numbing boredom.
Exactly. I'm reminded of Cyber Hell. Do you remember that from the Red Dwarf novels? Cyber Hell is where they put alternate universe evil Lister, and then eventually real Lister, and it's a deliberately perfectly made cybernetic hell, but it always seems to take the form that you only ever see of a really wretched day-to-day life, perfectly focused for you. So I think when Lister's there, all the movie theatres only show Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and stuff like that. It's everything is horrible. There's one where he goes to the wrong cyber hell, and he's actually this is pretty good, and then this guy whose actual hell it is brought in, and everything in his flat reminds him about how mediocre he is and about his failed relationships. So that
I genuinely don't remember this. I thought I'd read all the Red Dwarf novels.
It's what's the one? It's the one done just by Doug Naylor. Because remember, they split off. So Not Backwards by
Yeah,
Rob
because I
Grant.
really enjoyed Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, Back to Life, and Backwards. I think those three are fantastic.
Last
Didn't really
Human.
care for Last Human.
Yeah, that's the one, Last
There
Human.
you go.
Yeah.
I did read it, didn't like it so much, so I've memorised all the other three, but I can't say I remember Last Human that well.
In all fairness, there is
it might be worth reading it again.
a lot of stuff that's kind of meh. I don't like either of the two last books where they split off.
Really? I
much.
really enjoy Backwards. I think Backwards is excellent.
I read it when I was like a really young kid, and the friggin' simulants that they meet were too horrible.
Yeah,
And they
see,
killed
I
Ace
suppose-
Rimmer.
I am. Spoilers for Red Dwarf. I am talking. I read it as a teenager, and as we've discovered, since I became 30, I've rewatched a lot of the things I loved as a teenager and reread them, and I've gone, wow, a lot of the time I was just so teenage that it seemed good.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't good.
Though I've had about stuff like that with my early 20s. So, yeah, it
Really?
keeps happening. Yeah.
We've done entire series on that. The very first thing we did on the LHC was Razafon, which was like, was this good, or were you teenage enough that it seemed better than it was? So I suppose this entire podcast was originally founded on the idea of our teenage versions of us. Did they have taste?
So, yeah. So that's the interesting thing. So right at the end, it completely throws its premise out, and it says, no, we weren't in the good place after all. We were actually in the bad place. And this whole thing has actually just been a very inventive and I think quite cool form of torture brought up by Michael to sort of push how the bad place tortures people into new, interesting psychological heights. What is great about this is to then go back and re-watch season 1 and see how it all fits together with the new Michael's new motivation. Because essentially Michael's whole character changes entirely. His whole reason for doing what he's doing. And of course you do then notice that, as we should have perhaps made out, that there are actually only 4 humans in this place. Everyone else is like a demon extra. But yeah, there's only Jason, Tahani, Chidi, and Eleanor. And we'll be discussing how that all changes next week.